Hold on to your hats, history buffs, because the world of archaeology has been turned upside down. A newly unearthed religious artifact has left experts scratching their heads, defying all known explanations and rewriting the history books. This enigmatic object, shrouded in mystery and intrigue, challenges our understanding of ancient civilizations and their spiritual beliefs. Prepare to embark on a journey into the unknown as we explore the mind-boggling implications of this extraordinary discovery.
The Samarian Civilization. The ancient Sumerians were a group of people that suddenly became established in Mesopotamia circa 2900 BCE. No one is quite sure where they came from originally, but they believed and documented that their origins were not from planet Earth. According to ancient texts, the Sumerians were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki, who came to Earth after their planet Nibiru collided with another planet in the solar system. The aliens found themselves in short supply of gold, which they needed in their atmosphere, and saw that Earth was in high supply, so they landed here and created a new species that was half alien, half human to mine the gold for them. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but the Sumerians were real and they did have advanced scientific, agricultural, and technological knowledge, as well as an acute understanding of the solar system, which was highly advanced at their time. Researchers have recorded clay pot batteries that still contained electrodes, a flyable model airplane, as well as an unexplainable capability to cut large stones with exact precision. Not to mention that rockets, airplanes, and helicopters were all depicted on certain artifacts from the time too. Even stranger is that there is mitochondrial DNA evidence linked to a woman in Africa dating more than 100,000 years back near a gold mine. While of course we might never know for sure, the legend of the Anunnaki has made archaeologists question many things, and if it turns out to be true, it would certainly rewrite history.
The Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is a fascinating ancient artifact that was discovered in Iraq in 1936, consisting of a clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod inside. While mainstream archaeologists consider it to be a simple vessel for storing scrolls or valuables, they're not 100% sure. So some folks have entertained a more exciting possibility. Enter the aliens. I think everything I picked has some sort of supposed alien connection, at least according to me, so prepare for that. Some hypothesize that this ancient relic is a sophisticated power device. According to some, ancient civilizations could have been far more advanced than we give them credit for, and they might have harnessed electricity for various purposes, but forget about human ingenuity. Maybe the Baghdad Battery was brought to the fine people of Earth with the assistance of a far more advanced species from outer space. Some believe that the ancient astronauts from other worlds visited Earth in the distant past and shared their knowledge of electricity with us. Maybe they left the Baghdad Battery as a small gift or a souvenir from their intergalactic journey, offering a glimpse into their advanced technology.
Number 8. A goddess. On the western coast of India, there are ruins of a temple to the goddess Patini. Now, that part alone is not unheard of, as temples and goddesses are a large part of Hinduism. However, what is out of the norm is they have found an underground secret chamber that's rumored to hold an underground shrine to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Now, the ruins are now owned by a Hindu temple and hence forbidden, so nobody's been able to check what's underneath them. But according to writer Mog Morgan, the idea that it is a secret shrine to the Egyptian goddess is very believable. He theorizes that an Egyptian traveler came to India and started a group dedicated to his own goddess, Isis, and that Patini could be the Indian evolution of the same deity. If only we could get into that chamber to know once and for all.
Next up, we have the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are a series of ancient geoglyphs located in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru. They depict various shapes, including animals, plants, and geometric patterns, and the exact purpose and meaning of these etchings remains a bit of a mystery. Some theories suggest they might have been used for astronomical or religious purposes, but the strange thing is the scale of the designs means they can really only be appreciated from the air, and people weren't really looking down at the Earth 2,000 years ago. So who were these for? Were they used to appease gods, or maybe beings from outer space. There are all kinds of different images depicted, birds, monkeys, various different plants. Probably the strangest one though is what is often referred to by archaeologists as the astronaut. It's obviously a humanoid figure, but the size of the eyes and the shape of its body really does resemble some sort of spacesuit or classic extraterrestrial type being, so really leaves you with more questions than answers.
Coming in at number 6, Pudnamabaswamy Temple. In Kerala, India lies a grand temple containing 6 sealed underground vaults. Now, since its discovery, 5 of the vaults have actually been opened, and inside they found treasures, jewels, and gold worth millions. But there still remains one vault they have not been able to crack. In 2014, Supreme Court appointed committee members based on alleged mismanagement in the affairs of the temple were appointed to open the forbidden vault. First, they opened the metal grill door and discovered a sturdy wooden door just behind it. They opened this door as well and encountered a third door made of iron, which was jammed shut. The observers tried to force their way in, but failed. So they decided to hire a professional locksmith to open the door, but in mid-July, before the locksmith came, the royal family got an injunction from the Supreme Court against opening Vault B, and by July 2020, the Supreme Court refused to give permission to open the vault, as it was an issue involving religious sentiments. But it has left many wondering what is behind that last vault. Legend suggests that a spell is what is required to get open the last door, hence why the attempted prying methods used on the other 5 have been unsuccessful. But archaeologists are keen to hopefully one day be able to see what lies behind the sealed and forbidden vault.
At number 10, we have 125 soldiers. In 2015, a World War I trench that had been covered up since the end of the war was excavated in a small village near the city of Ypres in Belgium. Inside the maze of trenches, archaeologists discovered the bodies of 125 soldiers that had been entombed for 101 years. Some of these soldiers had been as young as 15. The site was known to the Allies back in the war as Hill 80 and had been taken from the Germans in June of 1917, but in 1918 the Germans had taken it back. As well as the bodies, archaeologists also, of course, came across all kinds of relics, helmets, ammunition, watches, religious artifacts, and all of this was discovered right next to people's peaceful country homes, a site the size of 2 whole soccer fields where countless lives were lost in brutal trench warfare. The World War I shell. This next one is a pretty recent discovery. Just back in 2020 in Fort Totten, Washington, D.C., a fascinating piece of history was discovered. During some construction work on a trail through northeast D.C.'s Fort Totten, a shell from World War I was found. It had been exposed after a long period of heavy rain, and as it turns out, it was actually a chemical weapon. The shell contained residue of mustard gas, a highly toxic chemical used in warfare during World War I. This surprising find sparked a lot of concerns about the presence of other chemical weapons in the area, and as amazing as this find was, it was also understandably pretty alarming. Experts have started investigating to ensure the safety of the public. What they discovered is quite intriguing. The shell was just a small part of a larger collection of buried chemical weapons in a neighborhood called Spring Valley. Back in the day, Spring Valley was used as a testing ground for chemical weapons research and development. At number 8 on the list, we have Mummified Soldiers. In a small town called Peio, a ski resort in the Italian Alps, several disturbing discoveries have been made as glaciers have begun to melt over time, revealing the mummified bodies of soldiers who fought in what was referred to as the White War between Austro-Hungarian troops and the Italian army in the Alps. Most of the bodies were discovered to be relatively well preserved. Probably the most famous case is that of 2 Austrian soldiers who were discovered in 2014. They had been teenagers when they died and had 2 bullet holes in their skulls. It would have been absolute hell just living in the trenches built on these frozen mountains and dealing with the bitter cold, let alone engaging in warfare day in and day out. A lot of them just succumbed to the elements. There were over 80 bodies discovered, but there's there's no telling how many more are still buried beneath the ice, as thousands upon thousands of lives were lost on both sides. Number 7. Barn Bomb. This next story takes us to Highland, Perthshire in Scotland, where a startling discovery was made in a barn. In October of 2021, a World War I shell was found in the back of a barn where it had been sitting for decades amongst everyday agricultural equipment. This would have been a really cool discovery, except it was an ordnance device that hadn't been detonated. There isn't a whole lot of information about what led to this discovery, but I imagine it must have been fairly well hidden, because I doubt someone just walked into the barn that day and was like, all right, garden shears, tractor, seeder, World War I explosive, World War I explosive. I start bugging out. What? Anyway, I don't know what that was. Anyway, bomb disposal experts were brought in from Edinburgh who safely destroyed the device. They must have been pretty excited getting to do that too. I definitely want to have watched when that happened. In eastern France in 2012, archaeologists discovered the entombed bodies, 21 German soldiers who were buried alive in trenches when an Allied shell exploded above the tunnel in 1918. The soldiers' remains were found in a shared underground shelter where they had taken cover. The shelter collapsed, trapping them inside and burying them alive. The bodies were found in a crouched position, indicating that the soldiers had tried to protect themselves during the collapse. Some of the men were found wearing their helmets while others were clutching their weapons. They had remained in the exact positions they were in when they died, leading many of the archaeologists to compare the scene to that of Pompeii. So the archaeologists noted that the bodies were remarkably well preserved, with some still having hair and teeth. The preservation was attributed to the soil conditions and lack of oxygen in the trench. The team took DNA samples from the remains to try and identify the soldiers and notify their descendants. Big circles. The big circles are mysterious archaeological features found in various locations across the Middle East. So these structures are massive circular shapes, visible only from above, and are made of stone walls or small stone mounds spread across different locations in the region, like Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. And they vary in size, with some stretching over 400 meters in diameter. But what were they built for? Nobody really knows. One of the most puzzling aspects of the big circles is their age, which is challenging to figure out without any artifacts connected with them or written records. Archaeologists have found it tough to date these structures accurately, leading to debates about their origins and the cultures that might have created them. Lots of theories have emerged in an attempt to unravel the purpose of these massive circles. Some researchers have put forward that the circles served as burial sites. Others speculate they may have been used to house animals, but the walls aren't really high enough for that. Most of them are only built like a few feet high. Of course, we have a bit of a similarity here to crop circles, and we all know the conspiracies surrounding them. So yeah, maybe, again, aliens, they could have a hand to play here too.
Next up at number 4, ape bones. At the Hill of Tara in Ireland, a set of strange bones were found, but they don't look like bones of a normal person. They belonged to an ape. And to make matters crazier, it's not even the only set of ape bones that have been found in Ireland. But the thing is, nobody knows how these apes managed to get there in the first place. And the only explanation is that someone, a long time ago, was taking apes up to Ireland and burying them there. One theory suggests that the apes might have been traded, but another theory is based on an Irish legend. The ancient legend claims that a group of strangers with magical powers came to Ireland on a massive ship and ruled the people from the Hill of Tara. Some think that the legend was based on a real event, and that the people they thought were magic were really a group of Egyptians with advanced technology. Now, this might seem a little out there, but despite that there are no native monkeys in Egypt itself, ancient Egyptians were incredibly familiar with monkeys, and they have held a permanent place in ancient Egyptian religion as one of the more important animal forms into which the gods might be transformed. On top of that, there's been actual DNA testing done on ancient Irish bodies that suggests they could have have an ancestor from the Middle East. And near the hill of Tara, there are 3,800-year-old remains of a boy wearing what appears to be an Egyptian necklace.
Next up we have Hobbits. In 2003, scientists found some bones in Indonesia on the island of Flores. These bones belong to small human-like species they named Homo floresiensis, or Hobbits. The Hobbits were tiny, around 3 feet tall, and were determined to have lived an estimated 50,000 to 100,000 years back. This discovery really changed how we think about our own ancestors. Before, it was believed that only our species, Homo sapiens, had big brains and were smarter than other ancient humans, but the Hobbits' small brain challenged that idea. It made us realize that early human relatives were more diverse and interesting than we thought. Some researchers think that the Hobbits might have come from an earlier human group and experienced kind of an island dwarfism, adapting to the new environment over time. Small islands can have a weird effect on the animals that live on them, but it's still not 100% known. Find taught us that the story of human evolution is even more complicated than we thought before. Who knows what other species of ancient humans there could have been roaming around that we still, haven't discovered yet. They could also, of course, be aliens, but I don't actually know. I don't actually think that.
Coming in at number 2, Lovelock Cave. In 1911, miners working in Nevada's Lovelock Cave were digging through piles of guano when they stumbled upon a massive wealth of ancient relics. The miners began searching, and as they sifted through the relics, they found something as exciting as it was confusing: the mummified remains of a 6'6" man with red hair. With this discovery, the cave became an archaeological dig site, and soon even more strange discoveries were being made. Things like 15-inch sandals which appeared to have been used, as well as a giant handprint that was twice the size of any normal handprint. Now, what is extremely incredible about the discovery is that there is an old Paiute legend that talks about red-haired, freckled-faced, man-eating giants who invaded the land and preyed on the Paiute people until they managed to chase the giants into a cave and set it on fire. And some have reason to believe that this archaeological discovery could actually back up the legend. Sadly, the original red-headed mummy has been destroyed, which makes everything a bit more difficult to prove, but one explanation is that the giants could have been a real group of violent European explorers, people who tormented the indigenous peoples and then met their end in Nevada.
The Antikythera Mechanism, a very fascinating archaeological discovery that continues to puzzle researchers to this day. It was found in 1901 off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in the wreckage of an ancient ship. The device seems to be this intricate mechanical calculator believed to date back between 150 and 100 BC. Its purpose and origin still not 100% known, but its complexity is pretty astonishing, especially for the time, meaning that more advanced technology could have been present in ancient times that we're completely unaware of. Some researchers think it was used for astronomical calculations or as a calendar, but it's kind of still speculative. What they do know is that the level of craftsmanship and sophistication involved is pretty impressive. It changed assumptions about ancient technology, and despite extensive research, certain aspects of its design and function remain unknown. In 2022, just off the coast of Virginia, a maritime historian and technical wreck diver by the name of Eric Petkovich made an incredible discovery: a German World War I U-boat. Despite having set out during World War I, it didn't actually sink until 1922, 4 years after the war. It had been taken by the Allies and was getting sent back to the US, but upon arrival at a naval base, it was decided it wouldn't really be of use, so it was just sent out to sea with explosive charges. There were multiple U-boats that sank in American waters, but they were never expected to be found because they were said to have sank deeper than any diver would be able to reach. That is until Eric and his crew came along, who conducted their search in secret. They ended up looking at records of where fishermen had gotten their lines and nets snagged and stuck, and discovered the wreck, which was 400 feet beneath the sea. Next on the list we have Gauntlet Gauntlet Daggers. These are just very odd weapons used in World War I. This war took place at an odd time in history because it was after the Industrial Revolution, but not that long after. So you had things like tanks and machine guns, but you also had remnants of the more close and personal forms of weaponry, some of which is stuff that feels like it's right out of the medieval era. Spiked clubs and swords were often used, but another odd weapon was the Gauntlet Dagger. Yes, this really did exist, and it was used. You'd slide it onto your forearm, and then there was this handle on the inside that you could grab onto and to keep it secure, and then you'd just have this stabbing weapon that also worked a bit like a shield too because of the gauntlet part. It looks like something out of a fantasy movie, but this was totally real. There was a lot of close quarters fighting in World War I because trenches would be raided, and they'd use a variety of close range weapons like this. It would have been absolutely brutal, fighting and dying in a muddy trench filled with rats and stuff just dug out of the ground. It was just awful. At number 3, this next story takes us again to the Alps of northern Italy, where melting glaciers revealed the barracks of soldiers who fought in the White War. High in the mountains, artifacts from the war were unearthed from the melting glacier. The objects found in an ice cave shed light on the experiences of soldiers who fought in the high altitude trenches over a century ago. Due to rising temperatures, the glacier has been receding rapidly, revealing a hidden treasure trove beneath its icy surface, and of course remains of bodies as discussed earlier. The items found included weapons, ammo, clothing, and personal belongings of soldiers from different nations who fought in the region during the war. The glacier was a strategic location during World War I, serving as a battleground for Italian and Austrian forces. Soldiers on both sides endured, again, extreme weather conditions and were under constant threat of avalanches. The artifacts they provided insights into their daily lives and the hardships that they faced. The artifacts were carefully excavated and documented, and they're currently on display in White War Museum in the nearby town of Peo. Alright, next on the list we have gas masks. Not only was World War I full of brutal trench warfare with a mix of heavy artillery and up close and personal close combat, but it was also the first war to introduce the use of toxic chemicals. World War I gas mask artifacts with their dark filters and disconcerting eye lenses, they're very haunting looking. Gas masks were just a grim necessity in the face of chemical warfare, an innovation that introduced new levels of terror to the conflict. The masks, designed to protect against toxic gases, have become almost symbols of just the devastating impact of this war. Looking at old photographs, they made the soldiers almost look like monstrous creatures or like faceless kind of ghosts, which really reflects the dehumanizing nature of warfare. They tell stories of the choking gases that seeped into the air. They must have felt like they were just in hell. Beyond their unsettling physical appearance, though, they represent the harrowing experiences of those who face the horrors of chemical warfare. And finally, at number 1, we have 270 German soldiers. In 2021, in the woods on a ridge not far from the city of Reims, France, a father and son made a shocking discovery. The remains of 270 German soldiers from World War I were found by Alain and Pierre Milanowski, 2 local historians. The soldiers were discovered in a network of underground tunnels. The tunnels were constructed by German forces during the war as part of their defensive efforts on the Western Front. The bodies, remarkably well preserved after a century, were found in a complex of underground chambers. The soldiers likely died during a battle in 1917 when the tunnel collapsed due to bombs from the French infantry, cutting off their oxygen supply. It would have taken them days to finally die. 3 men were actually rescued, however. One man, Karl Fisser, writing, "Everyone was calling for water, but it was in vain. Death laughed at its harvest, and death stood guard on the barricade so nobody could escape. Some raved about rescue, others for water. One comrade lay on the ground next to me and croaked with a breaking voice for someone to load his pistol for him."
In our number 10 spot, we have the Vatican Library. The Vatican Library is a very secret library closed to the public. The only people that have access to it are popes and people that have gone through a lengthy screening process, and even then, they need to know exactly what they are they're wanting information on and will only be given info on what they ask for. This library is the top secret library with history and documentation since the beginning of time. The amount of dark gossip that is within those walls, I'm sure, is exponential. From the little that we know, the Vatican Library holds letters from world leaders throughout history detailing major events that us little guys will probably never be privy to. I'm sure they even have documentation on alien sightings. The church refuses to talk about what they have and know, and it's really just a shame. I'm a history lover myself, and truly that would be a magical experience to be able to explore this library. Ah well. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to be recommended more content like this. In our number 9 spot, we have Operation Snow White. On June 20th, 1977, Michael Meisner, a Scientologist, contacted the FBI after allegedly being held captive for months. He revealed that he was a part of the biggest infiltration of the US government in history, in something called Operation Snow White. On July 8th, 1977, 156 FBI agents entered a Scientology center in LA in the largest FBI raid in history. It was discovered that 5,000 Scientology agents infiltrated the IRS, the US Coast Guard Intelligence, DEA, etc. There were bugged offices, planted false information, stolen files, and so much more found. Apparently, the goal of this initiative was to remove any bad reports about Scientology. Some of the founders were sentenced to a few years in jail because of these crimes. They definitely want you to forget about this, but I'm sure they have done it again, and I'm sure other churches and organizations have done the same thing. We just haven't heard about it, and perhaps they haven't been caught. In our number 8 spot, we have exorcisms. This one shocked me. I knew that priests could do exorcisms, but I didn't realize that this is something that they do much. I truly thought that exorcisms were done more often in the movies to young girls doing the crab walk down the stairs. Yeesh, thinking of that scene gives me the shivers. Anyways, apparently the Vatican had a chief exorcist named Father Gabriel Amorth, who had served over 60 years to the church and had performed over 160,000 exorcisms. Excuse me? Wow. How have there been that many people infiltrated by demons and this info isn't more widely talked about? Also, that is just this guy's number. Apparently popes and priests around the world perform exorcisms all the time. I'm shooketh. I could understand that the church wouldn't want to talk about this because it is a private, very sad thing to happen to a person, but man, that's a lot of people walking around feeling like they have demons within them. Pretty scary. In our number 7 spot, we have His Holiness. His Holiness was a book that was released to the public in 2012, which is based on the secret leaked papers about Pope Benedict. Apparently, the private documents were leaked by the Pope's butler. Yikes. Apparently, after an investigation, it was discovered that the individuals who were not from the Vatican were blackmailing gay bishops because they had broken their celibacy vows. The Pope went on to resign after these documents became public. Well, this is definitely a scandal, that's for sure. I remember people talking about this when it was happening, but I don't remember hearing the church comment on it. But I guess they sort of did through their actions, and I'm sure Pope Benedict was encouraged to resign. In our number 6 spot, we have the dead man on trial. This is a little piece of history that truly terrifies me and is such a testament to those times. In 897 AD, a literal dead man was put on trial. The man had been dead for 7 months. He had been dressed for the occasion by someone whom I'm sure was traumatized afterward. His name was Pope Formosus. He was being put on trial for acts that he had committed in his life. He had a lawyer and everything. He was found guilty and stripped of his former title as Pope, and everything he formerly did was declared void. His body was stripped of his clothes and put into rags before he was thrown into a river, the Tiber River in Italy, specifically because this river was where a lot of criminals' bodies were disposed of. Pretty gross. I wonder if there are any ghost haunting stories from this river. I bet you there are.
I'm taking a look at some of the coolest recent discoveries of ancient artifacts. Let's jump right in. And we're going to start off the list with a very recent find. This just happened last month, which was February of 2024 for those who may be possibly watching in the distant future. A dude stumbled on a massive ancient Roman artifact in a riverbed. It was found in the gravel of the Torre River in San Vito al Torre. Arvino Silvestri was the one who first spotted the ancient artifact and alerted archaeologists. The riverbank was excavated, and the archaeologists uncovered a massive block of carved limestone, revealing it to be an ancient Roman funeral monument, weighed in at a whopping 13,000 pounds, and it was in pretty good condition. It's so big and heavy that it required an excavator for transportation. Pretty remarkable find, and quite beautiful as well. It has an intricately carved figure of Erotes on one end, holding a torch and a poppy flower. Erotes symbolized various things, including love and death. The decoration style suggested that the monument was from the high imperial era of ancient Rome, but at this point we still don't have an exact date range. At least it hasn't been released to the public yet. Again, this is still a very new find, but this wasn't all they found either. There was also a stone urn, a limestone carving depicting a man's face, and a number of bricks and tile pieces. Next on the list is what I'm just going to call the treasure trove. Now, this news just came out last week at the time of recording this video. Archaeologists in Panama unearthed an ancient burial site filled with treasures at El Caño Archaeological Park. The burial dates back between 750 AD and 800 AD and looks like it must have belonged to an elite lord. The burial revealed the remains of a high-status man who was likely between 30 and 40 when he died. Aside from bones though, there was a whole bunch of treasure. Breastplates, belts adorned with gold, beads, intricate bracelets, earrings. There were even a pair of crocodile-shaped earrings, which is pretty cool. They also found gold-covered sperm whale teeth earrings. How extravagant is that? Not only do I have a necklace with whale teeth, but I gotta get them coated in gold too. That's not even all they found. They also uncovered bracelets and skirts made from dog teeth, bone flutes, and a bunch of pottery pieces. And on top of all the beautiful stuff this guy was buried with, he was also accompanied by a number of people who were sacrificed. He was incredibly rich, so he was just too above going into the afterlife alone. Next on the list, we have a horrifying pit of severed hands. Apparently severed hands were a big deal in ancient Egypt. Archaeologists made a pretty gruesome discovery when they came across pits filled with severed human hands. They were found during excavations of a palace near the ancient city of Avaris. These pits contained hundreds of severed hands, neatly stacked together, and the largest pit was right in front of the throne room. Researchers believe that these hands were severed from enemies captured in battles or raids. It's not entirely clear why these hands were collected and stored, but there have been images found of soldiers trading severed hands for gold, so some speculate that they might have been offerings to the gods or simply just trophies of victory. Next up, we have the Herxheim archaeological site. So back in 1996, during routine excavations, archaeologists came across this pit filled with human remains. Now, that's gotta be alarming even for an archaeologist. I can't imagine you ever get bored with finding human remains, but what made this find even creepier was how these folks had died. They weren't just the remnants of ordinary burials. There were signs that these people had been deliberately and systematically consumed by other humans. The bones all showed signs of butchering. Cut marks indicated careful dismemberment. It looked like these individuals were not just victims of violence, but also of ritualistic consumption. The pit contained the bones of over 500 people, dating back to the Neolithic period. Some suggest these folks were eaten as part of some sort of religious ritual, but other researchers think this may have been more a case of desperation. Possibly there could have been a famine. Next up, we have Neanderthal markings. So the recent discovery of ancient cave markings thought to be made by Neanderthals is obviously pretty exciting. The markings were found on the walls of a cave in central France and are believed to be over 57,000 years old, which would make them the oldest of their kind. The cave was first stumbled upon in 1846 during some quarrying work. It wasn't until 1912 that the archaeological finds started cropping up though, with the discovery of animal bones and tools that had likely belonged to Neanderthals. The cave seemed to have been sealed off from the outside world around 57,000 years ago, which is a hefty chunk of time before modern humans even set foot in the region around 42,000 years ago. So it's a solid bet that the finger marks on the walls were the handiwork of Neanderthals. So what are these markings exactly? They're a series of wavy lines, dots, and faint striations, and it's believed that Neanderthals created these engravings by sweeping and pressing their fingers across a thin line of film on the limestone walls. The height of the markings suggests they were made by taller beings, teenagers or adults, but were they decorative, ritualistic, were they even made intentionally? They're still not sure.
In our number 5 spot, we have the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank has had its fair share of scandals over the years, and you best believe that the church will not be bringing any attention to it by speaking about it in any way. Allegedly, to start off the scandals, it is said that the Vatican Bank received a church tax from Germany's leader during World War II, if you catch my drift. Also, allegedly, a large amount of money was paid to the IOR so that the Western banks couldn't track the Vatican's spending. The details have never been released to the public, so Lord knows where they put their money. But why would you want to hide your money in the first place? Perhaps so that no one would know what you're up to if you're up to no good, but also possibly because someone might be a threat, and that might be a reason to shield what you're doing. Either way, the secrecy is questionable. In our number 4 spot, we have mental illness in the church. When researching for this video, one of the things that shocked me was the amount of people that spoke about how the churches do not handle mental illness very well. You would assume that it would be approached with love and compassion and guidance to get help. But the common theme is that people have been told to just pray and it will make the illness go away. Some believe that this thought process stems from the very old thinking that mental illness stems from demons being in one's body, and so people are being told to pray them away because that's what was always done if someone needed, an exorcism or to get rid of an attached spirit. The biggest problem is that issues go untalked about. The people bottle it up inside, and when prayer doesn't work, the person dealing with the mental illness feels like a failure or like they don't have enough faith. Hopefully this is something that churches of all religions work on improving, as this is just unacceptable at this point in time. In our number 3 spot, we have shame. Within many religions, there has been the problem of spiritual criticism, which has led to emotional harm within the church communities. I'm not talking about outsiders passing judgment, I'm talking about religious community members passing judgments on each other. This bad behavior is committed under the banner of spirituality. From practices of shaming members if they don't fulfill religious expectations, to bad-mouthing members who have left, making people want to stay out of fear. Scientologists have been accused of doing that to members that have tried to leave, but also other churches have been accused of this as well. It's super unfortunate to hear that in communities that have, the core purpose of being loving, they are people that are shaming each other. Talk about not practicing what you preach. In our number 2 spot, we have misusing their power. In recent years, it has become public knowledge that the French clergy took advantage of more than 200,000 individuals since the 1950s, mainly males. The Catholic Church has been accused of turning a blind eye to this happening, and many have been outraged that this went on for so long without someone stepping in. Allegedly, it wasn't until the 2000s that some progress was made. Before that, the church showed complete indifference to the victims. Through a series of investigations, 2,700 victims gave testimonies about what happened to them, and thousands were identified through archives. A wide-range study showed that there could be up to 330,000 victims. In recent years, about 2,900 to 3,200 priests have become suspects to these crimes. Wow. Truly despicable. I hope that there is some kind of justice for these victims. In our number 1 spot, we have the Salem witch trials. Most people believe that the witch trials were a result of many things: bad weather, a poor government, and paranoid leaders. But what a lot of people may not be aware of is the idea that the Catholic and Protestant churches possibly used the trials to compete with each other for followers. Pretty dark. History.com reported that economists Peter Leeson and Jacob Russ believe that, quote, the two churches advertised their finesse at persecuting witches as proof that they were the best church to join if you wanted protection from Satan. Witches, after all, were doing the bidding of Satan, so getting rid of them was a way to protect people from them. Wow. Well, that will definitely persuade 1 or 2 people, that's for sure. It has also been noted that the Catholic Church did not fear or acknowledge witches in history until the Protestant Church became a competitor threat.
Now we head back to Egypt with the discovery of an ancient Roman city in Luxor. The news about this incredible find was announced back in January of 2023. Egyptian archaeologists found a very well-preserved Roman city in Luxor, dating back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE. It's now been described as the oldest and most important city found on the eastern bank of Luxor by Mustafa Waziri, head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. The archaeological team unearthed a whole whackload of these ancient structures, including residential buildings, offering insights into how people lived during that time. There were also the discovery of 2 pigeon towers used for housing carrier birds, meaning this city was very likely involved in communication networks at the time. There were also metal workshops found in the city that contained whole collections of artifacts of their own, pots, tools, and a collection of bronze and copper Roman coins. Next up, we have the 4,500-year-old tomb. This is another recent 2024 archaeological discovery. I really tried to fill this list up with new stuff. So this discovery was made about 20 miles south of Cairo. Egyptian and Japanese archaeologists stumbled on an ancient Egyptian tomb carved into rock over 4,000 years ago. I always say stumbled on, like these archaeologists are just kind of walking around and they're like, oh, it's an ancient tomb. Obviously, there's more that goes into it than that. It's just the easiest way for my brain to wrap my head around it. They stumbled on it. So anyway, the tomb was carved into rock over 4,000 years ago, dated back between 2649 and 2150 BC. The tomb contained a whole bunch of graves and artifacts from different historical periods. During their excavation, the team unearthed a bunch of treasures. There were human remains buried alongside a vividly colored mask, a burial site from the 2nd dynasty, and an incredibly well-preserved alabaster vessel from the 18th dynasty. In the tomb, there were also 2 terracotta statues depicting the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis and Harpocrates, along with a stela with a man's name encrypted on it, a man named Heroides. I think that's how you pronounce it. You've all heard of the Moai statues on Easter Island before, I know, but just last year, archaeologists found a new one. This new statue adds to the nearly 1,000 that have already been found on the island. This latest statue was uncovered in a dry lake bed, the only one to be found in that location. So far, anyway. The discovery was made by the organization that oversees the island's national park. Terry Hunt, a professor of archaeology at the University of Arizona, was incredibly excited about the find and described how important it is that these statues be retrieved, helping to preserve the history of the Rapa Nui people. So with how much attention and research has gone into the Easter Island statues, why was it that this one was just discovered now? Well, they're saying it's probably because of changes in the area's climate, resulting in the drying out of the lake that was surrounding the sculpture, and they're thinking it probably won't be the last one to turn up. Next, we have another exciting discovery. News about this came out just recently as well. A ton of cool artifacts were found in Brazil. And this one's pretty cool because this stuff was discovered completely by accident. This really was like stumbling on it. So there was a routine construction project going on at an apartment complex, but then construction workers came across a pretty alarming find, human bones, and then more and more stuff started turning up. There were also pottery shards, so these bones weren't recent. Turns out all this stuff belonged to an ancient civilization dating back as far as 9,000 years ago. During excavations, they found thousands of artifacts, and not only that, but these artifacts could possibly reshape the understanding of human settlement in Brazil. The site known as Rosanne's Farm was full of stone tools, ceramic fragments, decorated shells, and bones, which was excavated over the course of 4 years of intense digging. And in total, 43 human skeletons and more than 100,000 artifacts were uncovered. Archaeologists unearthed remnants of a group that existed around 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, meaning that humans moved into the region much earlier than previously believed. The leader of the excavation stated the discovery could, quote, completely change the history of not just the region, but all of Brazil. End quote. This finding may totally change the way we look at the timing and the roots of human migration into the Americas from Asia, which is pretty cool. And we're finishing off the list with the finding of a mysterious Anglo-Saxon artifact, again just in January of this year, in Langham, England. A treasure hunter made a pretty cool discovery. with a metal detector. It was a small artifact made of gilded silver. It was just under an inch in diameter and 0.3 inches in height. Apparently it dates back to the 8th century. It also has an image of an animal engraved on top, along with Celtic knot-like patterns. Not entirely clear what the object is. The Portable Antiquities Scheme, who are responsible for recording finds like this, noted the thing is similar to other items discovered in the same time period, but this one stands out because of its size and its design. Historian Helen Giek speculated that the spiral pattern on the artifact looked a lot like Celtic designs, and that the animal depicted could be a horse. Definitely what it looks like to me as well. She also praised the craftsmanship, noting that it was created by someone with a keen eye for beauty. And again, I agree, that thing, it looks fantastic. Some of these ancient carvings, paintings, and artifacts seem to depict a world that doesn't really match with our own historical records. I mean, what does this cave art look like it's depicting? If you were to ask me, I'd say someone had just watched a bunch of Bob Lazar documentaries and then decided to paint some aliens onto some rocks. The thing is, these cave paintings are tens of thousands of years old. These are depictions of what are called Wanjinas by ancient tribes in Australia. These tribes, found in the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, have culture and traditions that have been alive for at least 60,000 years, maybe even older. The Wanjinas were described as sky beings, or spirits from the clouds who came down from the Milky Way during dream time. They created the earth and all its inhabitants. The legend goes that these beings spent some time on earth creating, teaching, and being gods to the Aboriginal people. Eventually, the Wanjinas disappeared. Some descended into the earth, while others returned to the sky and can be seen at night as moving lights. So, you know, by the sounds of that, maybe the alien connection isn't that far off after all. I find this super fascinating because, I mean, damn, these things really do look like your classic bulging-eyed, light-skinned gray that 90% of alien encounters are described looking like. So, did these beings really exist? Were they entities from deep in space or a parallel universe, or is this all just very coincidental? Are these ancient Indian rock paintings depicting visitors from space or another realm? One archaeologist definitely thinks so. Back in July of 2014, the State Department of Archaeology and Culture reached out to the Indian Space Research Organization for help with some ancient rock paintings found in caves near Charama in the Kankar district. Archaeologist J.R. Bhagat has been studying these rock paintings and believes they could be around 10,000 years old, which is pretty insane because some of these things look a lot like the types of sci-fi aliens we imagine today. Bhagat thinks these cave paintings depict extraterrestrials and UFOs. You've got large humanoid figures that look like they're descending from the sky, some with what look like helmets or antenna, and a disc-shaped craft with 3 rays coming from its base. It's kind of hard to look at some of these things and see anything else but aliens and UFOs, and as if it couldn't get any more uncanny, locals have told stories passed down from generation to generation about beings known as the Rohilla people, which translates to the small-sized ones. But according to these legends, the Rohilla people would come down from the sky in round flying objects and whisk away villagers who would never be seen again. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The Abydos carvings have been a hot topic of debate for years. Found in the ancient temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, among your usual hieroglyphs and carvings, there's a set of strange images that really do look like modern-day aircraft and vehicles. I mean, take a look at these things. One kind of looks like a helicopter. Some say the one on the top right there looks like a submarine. I kind of see a yacht myself. Below that, you have what looks like a jet plane or an advanced spacecraft of some kind, perhaps. It's easy to see why there are a lot of wild theories about these carvings. One of the most popular theories is that these carvings are a sign that there could have been advanced technology in ancient Egypt, possibly influenced by extraterrestrials. That aliens visited Earth thousands of years ago and shared their technology with the ancient Egyptians. So the Egyptians were just carving what they saw onto the temple walls. Again, if this really was the case, who were these beings? Were they aliens from a distant world, or were they people visiting from far in the future or a parallel universe? One of the most famous and mysterious artifacts of the ancient Maya is this sarcophagus lid right here. This is the lid of Pakal the Great's sarcophagus, found in the Temple of Inscriptions in Mexico. Pakal was a powerful Mayan king who ruled from 615 to 683 AD. When his tomb was discovered, the carvings on his sarcophagus lid had archaeologists pretty confused. The lid shows Pakal in a strange pose, lying on his back, surrounded by all these intricate carvings of what really looks like complex machinery. Kind of looks like he's sitting in some kind of cockpit with his hands on controls and his feet operating pedals. Kind of looks like there's a bit of smoke also billowing out the sides. Some think it looks like he's piloting a spacecraft, or at least some sort of highly advanced piece of machinery for the time. So what was this meant to depict? Did the ancient Mayans have access to technology we have no physical knowledge of? And could this piece and others like it somehow have crossed over from another reality where there was advanced technology like this back then? Who knows?
The Sumerian people, the earliest known civilization who lived in ancient Sumer in Mesopotamia, are incredibly fascinating and confusing. It is believed that the civilization resided in Sumer, which is now southern Iraq, sometime between 4500 and 4000 BC, after arriving from the south, having traveled through the Persian Gulf. Early settlers were experts in farming, raising cattle, weaving textiles, carpentry, pottery, and even brewing beer. By the year 3000 BC, the population had become incredibly advanced, building massive pyramid-like structures long before the ancient Egyptians. And by 2800 BC, the civilization reached its peak population, somewhere between 40 to 80,000 people living within the city's 6 miles of definitive walls. It is believed that the Sumerian civilization invented pyramids, the wheel, script, arithmetic, geometry, irrigation, saws and other tools, candles, chariots, harpoons, and beer. It is also believed by some that the reason this civilization was so advanced is because of their interactions with aliens. Interactions many claim to be depicted in the Summer's Triumph Tapestry, which was created in 1538 in the Flemish region of Belgium. If you look closely, you can see what appear to be UFOs depicted in the skies above the Sumerian people. Coincidence? Perhaps, or maybe something else entirely. If it is true that the ancient Sumerians got help from extraterrestrial beings, it is safe to say that not only did aliens alter our reality, they actually had a hand in creating it entirely, as the ancient Sumerians are often credited with creating the building blocks that shaped modern society as we know it today.
This has become a pretty famous photograph. The strange figure in the photo has been dubbed the Ilkley Moor creature. On December 1st, 1987, a former police officer going by the pseudonym Philip Spencer was on a morning walk in Ilkley Moor in West Yorkshire, England, when he spotted a strange creature standing on a hillside next to the road. He'd managed to snap a picture of it before it ran off. Spencer chased after it, but it disappeared into the brush. It was then that he witnessed a large disc-like object fly into the sky. It made a loud humming noise, almost like a helicopter. Whatever this thing was, though, it wasn't a chopper. It was whitish in color and consisted of 2 saucer shapes stacked on top of one another and took off at an incredible speed. Spencer headed back home and was horrified to realize that nearly 3 hours had gone by that were completely unaccounted for.
How's this for an alien encounter? On December 29th of 2012, a fireball appeared over the skies of Sri Lanka. A fireball that was later determined to have been a meteorite. A meteorite that scientists confirmed contained genuine alien fossils. Now before you quit your job and go scream "I told you so" at your wife, I should probably clarify that when I say alien fossils, I don't mean bones or anything like that. I'm talking about microfossils and algae that, according to Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe and researchers from the Jamie Wallace Cardiff School of Mathematics, are not of terrestrial origin, meaning that the fossils and algae found inside of the meteorites were one of the first confirmed signs of alien life in recorded history. Perhaps the most exciting thing about this discovery, other than proving the existence of life outside of Earth, is that it provides compelling evidence of panspermia, the hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe and is spread to different planets by meteors and other solid space debris. theories. An interesting theory that may very well provide us with the answer of how humans ended up on Earth in the first place and why many depictions of aliens are described as humanoid. I mean, if we all evolved from the same thing, it makes sense that we would kind of look alike, right?
On the morning of March 30th, 1988, Helen Thomas and her mom Carol set out for their usual walk to work at the local mill. They took the same route they always did, but on this particular morning, things would take a strange turn. Out of nowhere, they heard a low humming sound above them. Before they could make sense of it, a super bright light beamed down, blinding them completely. When the light finally vanished, Helen and Carol found themselves feeling dizzy and nauseous, and Helen's leather jacket was soaking wet, but the ground around them was completely dry. They were pretty shaken, but continued on to work anyway. When they arrived, though, the security guard told them they were hours late. In the days that followed, both women started developing blisters and rashes. It wasn't until years later that they reached out to Tony Dodd, a well-known UFO researcher. Under hypnosis, they revealed some unsettling details. They remembered being in a bright room, lying on tables with a weird net-like material holding them down as strange creatures with big heads and dark eyes performed bizarre experiments on them, even taking eggs from their bodies with a thin tube. One odd memory stood out as well. One of the aliens seemed fascinated by Helen's leather jacket, rubbing it on his face and hands until it was soaking wet. Gross. Now, hypnosis, I'm always a little iffy about that, but the initial story of them being late for work after seeing the strange light and everything, that's all still very, very strange.
The Glorification of Eucharist, or the Disputa of Eucharist as it's known in Italian, is a religious artwork painted in the 16th century by an Italian painter named Ventura Salimbeni. If you start from the bottom and work your way up, the piece starts off relatively normal, depicting a number of religious authorities gathered around an altar. But as your gaze meets the top of the painting, things get a little more interesting. The Holy Trinity, God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit, represented by a white dove, are shown sitting in the clouds, which would be all good and well and by the Holy Book if it weren't for the fact that it appears as though Jesus and God are being separated by some kind of large, spheric, metallic, ancient space satellite with telescopic antennas, a light at the top center, and a dial on the bottom left. While the depiction of the satellite has been highly debated, with many religious experts claiming that the orb is a representation of the universe, the light and dial the sun and moon, and the antennas scepter wands, many others claim that the glorification of the Eucharist is in fact proof of alien life and their influence on humanity. Or at the very least, this painting could prove the existence of time travel.
The Per Reese Map is incredibly weird. It's an old map made way back in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Per Reese. What's so mysterious about it though? Well, it shows parts of the world that shouldn't have been known about back then, like Antarctica drawn also without ice. And everything is drawn with a surprising amount of accuracy. Many historians have looked at the map, or what's left of it, which is only about a third, and most agree that it just doesn't seem like something that could have been made at the time. So there are all sorts of conspiracy theories about how Per Reese would have made the map. Some say he had access to ancient maps from Atlantis or some other lost civilization, and you know what I'm gonna say next. Was there some help from an advanced visitor or visitors? It's impossible to say. All we can do is ponder how this guy seemed to know so much about places that wouldn't get explored fully until many centuries later. Off to Scotland now, we have the Cocknose Stone. The Cocknose Stone is this huge rock in Scotland covered in all kinds of weird carvings. The stone is about 5,000 years old, and it's covered in these swirling patterns, circles, and strange symbols. One of the coolest things about this stone is that it's massive, about 42 by 26 feet, all covered in what is essentially ancient graffiti. And as for what the carvings mean, no one knows, but some archaeologists think they might be maps of the stars or some kind of astronomical calendar of some kind. They could also be religious symbols, or there could be messages on here from something, perhaps even ancient aliens? Yeah, again, some people think aliens could have had a hand in making these carvings. Speaking of graffiti, by the way, the stone actually had to be buried in 1965 because young hooligans just wouldn't stop messing with it. Does this thing look like it's from ancient Egypt to you? I honestly thought I was looking at the steering wheel of an old tractor or something, but this object was found in 1936 in the tomb of an ancient Egyptian named Sabu. For this reason, this weird object has been referred to as the Disc of Sabu. So what the hell is it exactly? Well, your guess is as good as mine, and apparently as good as most historians or archaeologists, because they're not sure either. Of course, they can make more educated guesses than us, but the only definitive thing you can say is that this thing looks very out of place. There are strange circular structures in parts of the Middle East, often referred to as wheels. They're found in spots in Syria and Saudi Arabia. They're kind of like big stone wheels set into the desert, and they're super old, about 2,000 years or even older. And much like the famous Nazca Lines, which we've talked about plenty of times on the channel, they can only be viewed from above, and nobody is exactly sure what their purpose was. The wheels weren't really noticed until the 20s when airplanes came around. From the ground, they're hard to spot. I mean, you can see that there are stones there, but you obviously don't get the full picture until you're up high looking down. So why were they made if they couldn't really be appreciated back then? Well, some people think the artists didn't make them for themselves or the people around them, but for beings they believed were looking down at them from the skies. Who were these beings? Was there religious stuff involved here, or did they have some flying friends up above? You tell me. How cool looking are these, right? Ancient depictions of monsters are always fascinating, and I mean, that has to be what these are, right? These sculptures are from ancient Iraq, way back in the Ubot period, around 4000 BC. They look sorta human, but with undeniably lizard-like features. So are these just imaginative pieces of art, or were the sculptors capturing beings they really saw or even interacted with in real life? They have these long heads, slit-like eyes, and what look to be snouts instead of human mouths. While archaeologists think these figurines could just be symbolic or part of religious beliefs, some also think there could be more to the story. As always, what do you think? The Crucifixion of Christ painting is a famous artwork that shows Jesus nailed to the cross. And this is a scene that's been painted and drawn by artists for centuries, but in one version of this painting, one made by an unknown artist who's been lost to time, something strange seems to be lurking in the background. Take a look. So you see those flying objects in the back. What do they look like to you? In this 1350 fresco from the Visoki Dekani Monastery in Kosovo, Serbia, there are these weird flying objects in the sky. There are two people seated inside them. Now, something important to note is that this was painted long after the events depicted in the painting, so it's not like whoever made this was drawing exactly what they saw. Obviously, there's a lot of artistic license here, but it was also made long before planes were a thing. So what are these flying things supposed to be? Could there have been visitors flying through the sky at the time the artist was creating the work and he just decided to add them in? It's possible. Also very likely that these are just abstract versions of the sun and moon. The Lizard Man. This next one is a full-on encounter with a reptilian being in Scape Ore Swamp, South Carolina. Usually anything close to an alien sighting is a UFO. And those are just unidentified flying objects. We really don't know if they have anything to do with extraterrestrials at all. But a humanoid reptilian or lizard-like creature, that sounds pretty alien to me. There is said to be a strange creature stalking the swamplands of Lee County, South Carolina, that being a big 7-foot-tall lizard man. On the 14th of July, 1988, sheriffs of Lee County were called to inspect damage done to a vehicle parked outside a home right next to the Scape Ore Swamp. Then a young man named Christopher Davis came out to make his own report to the police, saying that just 2 weeks prior, his car had also been damaged, only he'd actually seen the person, or rather the thing, that was responsible. Christopher described an encounter with a massive 7-foot-tall creature with 3 fingers per hand, red eyes, and green, wet, scaly skin. He'd been driving home from work one night when he got a flat tire. He'd gotten out of his car to fix it when he saw the thing making its way towards him. He jumped in his car and keeled off, but the creature was so fast that it managed to catch up to his speeding vehicle. Then it hopped onto the roof, scratching at it. Christopher hit the brakes, causing the thing to fly off his car before making his escape. When news of this report hit the papers, it caused a frenzy. More and more reports started coming in. The local radio station offered a $1 million reward to whoever could catch the beast, so hunters even started flocking to town to try and catch it. But reports began to die down by the end of the summer, and local sheriffs began writing off the supposed encounters as, get this, bear sightings, because if there are two things that look so eerily similar, it's definitely a furry bear and a big green scaly lizard monster with red eyes and no hair to speak of.
In 2008, a strange piece of machinery was discovered in a mine in Vladivostok, Russia. It looked like a piece of tooth wheel, kind of like what you would see on modern-day gear-operated machinery. The object had been found embedded in a piece of coal. The man who discovered the object became curious about its origin, and so he showed it to a group of scientists who determined it to be 1. Man-made, constructed out of almost pure aluminum, and 2. Almost 300 million years old. Two conclusions that raised countless questions. 1. How did the object come to be? Because aluminum of such purity and shape are not found naturally. And as far as we once know, humans didn't figure out how to make anything close to this object until 1825. Of course, this has led many people to believe that the piece is a mechanism that somehow broke off of an alien spaceship. On the other hand, scientists aren't so sure, but with no other explanation of how it came to be, it's definitely a possibility.
In October of 1974, John Day was on the way back home to Essex with his family. The journey should have only taken about half an hour, but as he and his wife Susan were putting their kids to bed, they realized that they'd arrived home much later than they'd expected. An extra 3 hours had gone by. Over the next few days, the whole family started having terrifying nightmares, being sucked up into a strange craft before being operated on. John and Susan felt constantly anxious and confused. And not knowing what to do, John reached out to a local UFO group for advice. They suggested he talk to Leonard Wilder, a hypnotist experienced in cases of missing time. Under this hypnosis, John recalled driving into a weird bright mist that seemed to fall from the sky. He remembered seeing a bright light descending into a nearby field, then shooting towards their car. Before he knew it, the car was lifted into the sky. He then remembered being poked by sharp instruments. He also described the spaceship having furniture that was molded into the walls with no seams or joins. And the next thing he knew, they were back in their car driving up the driveway. Suffice to say, the whole experience left them with more questions than answers.
In 1998, an electrical engineer named John J. William discovered a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt, and so he dug it up. What he had discovered was a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared to contain some sort of electrical component. Williams later claimed that that electrical component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded inside to the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appeared to be man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, it was something else entirely. Furthermore, the rock was later dated to be at least 100,000 years old. Fast forward to today, and Williams is open to having others research the strange discovery, but he does have a few conditions. 1, he must be present for whatever discovery is made, and 2, the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern-day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, but no such discovery has been made, leading people to believe that the object must not have originated on Earth and is therefore proof of ancient extraterrestrial presence on our planet. It's possible. Anything's possible.
In 2004, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, 2 Navy pilots, were out doing a routine training exercise off the coast of San Diego when things took a weird turn. They got a call from an operator back at base who told them there was something odd in their airspace. This wasn't just a blip on the radar either. Apparently, the military had been tracking this unidentified flying object for weeks. It would do strange things like dive suddenly or just hover in place, and the operator asked Fravor and Slate to go check it out and see if they could get a visual on whatever this thing was. And sure enough, after searching the skies for a bit, they finally spotted it. According to the reports, the UFO was about 40 feet long and was hovering roughly 50 feet above the ocean. Fravor decided to get a closer look and started descending towards the UFO, but just as he was getting closer, the thing rose to meet him before zipping away at a speed he couldn't even begin to match. And Fravor later said to reporters, "I can tell you, I think it was not from this world. There you have it, folks. Keep your eyes on the skies. You never know what you're going to see up there. I've been your host, James.
I've been your host, Anna.
Catch you next time.
Cheers.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about the creepiest glitches that Alexa has made, and yes, we're talking about the Alexa in your home. Viewer discretion advised. Don't forget to turn off your own Alexa. Click the video now and we'll see you guys in that next video.